In this video, we're going to take a look at setting keyframes. Keyframes are the basis for creating any type of animation inside of Maya. To look at how to establish a keyframe, we're going to build a small little animation of a sphere just bouncing up and down. I'm going to start by going to Create, Polygon Primitives, Sphere, and we get our basic sphere object. We'll call it a ball. And I'm going to take this and just move it so that it appears to be sitting on top of that XZ grid plane there. And now, prior to starting any animation, I want to make sure that my object is ready to receive animation. And what I mean by this is we want to get rid of any transformations that are on our object or any history that might be on there. These things can cause a problem later on as we animate, so we want to avoid that. So first, let's get rid of our transformations. We always want those transformations to be at 0, just for the simple premise that anything plus 0 is going to equal that number. So if we have a value in there, we're going to start with an offset, and that can kind of screw up our whole number system. So let's go to Modify and choose Freeze Transformations, and that will get rid of those values. And then we also want to remove any history, so I'll go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. Now I have a clean object, but let's rename it, and we'll name it Ball. And now we're good to go. I want to establish the overall frame count for my animation. Down below here we have our timeline, and it shows us that our timeline is currently set to a maximum frame value of 200, but we're only focusing on the first 120 frames. This is controlled right here. This allows us, we can expand this out to the full length of our animation. It allows us to establish a much smaller playback range so we can focus on a smaller portion of a larger animation. For our ball bouncing, I'm going to change the length of our animation just to 60 frames. So I'll come down here, and again, this is our end length, and we'll just set that to 60. And that is automatically going to update that playback range, and that's the interior numbers here. Now, likewise, if I wanted to expand my animation, I can type in the value here. If I type it in here, we'll just put in 90. You'll see that my playback range stays the same, but then we can expand it accordingly. But just as a quick fix, we could go in and just expand the playback range, which will also expand the entire animation. So if I type in 90 there, it'll also increase the end of my animation. So let's just return that back to 60. And again, that outer number will affect both as we reduce the size of our animation. And let's set a keyframe. Now we have a couple of different ways that we can set keyframes. The first is just by hitting S on the keyboard. So if I hit S with my object selected, that will then add a keyframe to all of the available channels inside the channel box. So you can see that every single value over here now is a different color, signifying that we have a keyframe for that particular channel. So S is kind of a global keyframe for what we see there in the channel box. Now, I really don't need to add keyframes to any of those channels except the ones that I want to animate. And in this case, I really only want to animate the translate Y. So I'm going to undo that, and we're going to take a look at a different way to add keyframes. I'll just hit Control Z to undo, and I'll go back, and instead of hitting S, I'm going to go to the channel that I want to add a keyframe to. And I could select multiple channels here as well, but I just want to grab the Translate Y, and I will right-click on that channel and do Key Selected. And now I only get a keyframe for that Translate Y. Now when we add a keyframe, we will also get a red tick in our timeline. That red tick shows up there at our first frame of animation. Let's go ahead and move out to another frame, and we'll add another keyframe. So I'm going to just click in my timeline, and I can click or drag And I'll just go out to frame 30. Let's zoom out just a little bit here, and we'll raise our ball up in the Y channel. And now at frame 30, I will right-click on Translate Y and choose Key Selected again. Notice I get another red tick in my timeline, signifying that there is some sort of keyframe there. Now I can scrub through this and see that animation. We can also use our playback controls off to the lower right. If I hit the play button, it'll go through our animation. And we can just click again to stop it. Or we could go backwards or by keyframe. So this button right here, you can see there's that red tick. If I click on it, it's going to take me to the next keyframe in the timeline. And it will cycle through from the end of the timeline back to the beginning of the timeline. And we can go either way, or we can step one frame at a time. Or at the very end, we can go forward or backward to the very end of our animation. And this will only go to that playback range. Now, I want to add another keyframe here, and we're already at frame 60. I want to take the ball and bring it back down to 0. Before I do that, I'm going to take a look at my animation preferences. This is easily accessed by this little icon right here of a little red guy kind of running there. We can click on this, and it will take me right to my time slider and animation preferences. And here I can change my playback speed or change how it loops. In this case, I'm going to leave it just set to continuous. And for our playback speed, we could set it to play every frame. And this will go as fast as your computer will allow it to. So let's just turn that on for right now. And our max playback speed is set to free, which will use up our RAM and go as fast as possible. We could also switch that to real time, which means that it will play every frame, so it's not going to try to skip anything, and it will attempt to do that 24 frames per second. I'm going to leave it just set there at free. And then let's go to our other animation preferences here. So we have animation and we have time slider. I'm going to click on animation, and up at the top here, we have auto key. I'm going to turn this on. And with auto key, this allows us to move an object and have a keyframe automatically placed for us. So now I don't have to hit S. I don't have to right click on a specific channel. I do have to establish the animation first, as it says right here, key modified attributes. So as long as we have a keyframe on some attribute, and then when we move in the timeline or move our object, a new keyframe will be assigned to it. So this makes animating much faster. I don't have to continually manually add that keyframe. If we click, we also have the option here to key all attributes. This is similar to what we were looking at originally with hitting S on the keyboard. Everything is going to get keyframed. Now, typically, that's not what we want. So I'm going to leave this on key modified attributes, and we'll hit save. Now, that auto key function we can also access by this button right here. This will just toggle that, so I do not need to go into my animation preferences in order to turn that on. But I do want to make sure in my animation preferences that I'm not keyframing everything and I'm only keyframing my modified attributes. We set that, so now we can use this auto key, and I'll just turn it off so you can see, and then we'll turn it back on. Now, when I move that sphere, my keyframe will automatically be placed. So I'll grab this in the Y and just translate that down a bit, and then you'll see as soon as I let go, I get a red key tick at frame 60. And we'll hit play. Notice how it's also going much faster, a little too fast, because the computer is now playing back at its maximum speed because we set it to play back freely. Let's go ahead and change that so it's not so distracting. And instead of play every frame, we'll leave that at real time, 24 frames per second, and we'll hit save to make sure that it takes those changes. And we'll hit play again. And now it looks a bit more appropriate. Let's stop that animation and go back to our very first frame. Now at frame 1, we can see that our translate Y is set to 0. If I scroll back out and go to frame 60, we're not quite returning all the way back down to 0 there. I could simply hit 0 and then hit enter, and then my keyframe, because auto key is turned on, will automatically update. And you can see when I scroll off of there, here we're at 0.56, but then when I go to frame 60, it does return to 0. Now something else we could do, and let's go back here and just mess this up a little bit. We'll just raise that up, and that auto key picks that up. Something else I can do here is copy this frame and paste it at frame 60. A simple way to make this happen is to middle mouse on the keyframe and drag in the timeline to the spot on the timeline where you want that keyframe to exist. So I middle moused on frame 1, dragged it out to frame 60, and now I can save a keyframe here. Now, unfortunately, auto key will not pick this up because we really haven't done anything. We haven't made a change to our animated object or to that channel. If I am copying like that, I will have to go to Translate Y, right click, and just choose Key Selected. And now we have a duplicate, and it matches back from frame 60 to frame 1. Now, another option we have in our timeline is to manipulate these keys simply by selecting them and moving them. So what I could do is hold Shift and then left click and select. And you can see that selection bar is a large red bar. And when we select a certain area, we can then move that frame. This will allow me also to move multiple frames and scale the distance between them. I'm just going to click off there and then go back and hold Shift and click on frame 30, and with the left mouse button, drag out to frame 60. And I'll grab these two middle arrows here and just shift this down a bit. Then I could grab the outer arrow and scale the animation. And now you can see that that frame 60 is now moved down into our animation. Looks like it's right around frame 36 or so, maybe 37. There we go. Now when I play my animation, the ball is going to move faster as it goes up and down because we moved those keyframes to exist in a shorter amount of time. We can also access some of these features by right-clicking on the timeline and modify things like we have in our animation preferences, our playback speed, display for our key ticks, change the way that it loops, either play it back once, oscillate it so it will go back and forth, or run continuous. And we can copy and paste through here as well, and also delete specific keyframes.